Evening, one and all. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. Glad you have tuned in. Glad you have made us part of your evening. Some changes coming to the program in 2018. You're going to notice we're going to be with you for an hour. Also, the program is pre-recorded, and we've done this to give you a little bit more of an opportunity to access the program. Now, here's how you got to do it. The show will actually air, which you're going to see here in mere moments, on AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas in Houston. All you got to do is call between the hours of 7:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock in the morning and listen and weigh in on the topics that we're talking about. 281-558-5738. Then you tell your friends, you tell your family, tune in right here on the Vida Television Network in the evening, and you can hear your contribution to the program. Hope this is fun for you, gives you a chance to participate a little more fully in what we do here. So without further ado, it's time for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide.
Get ready for the next generation of talk radio. It's time for politics, pop culture, and proud pro-American conservatism. Strap yourselves in. Grab your coffee. It's time for the Chris Salcedo Show on AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas.
And good morning, one and all. Glad you've tuned in to the program, the Chris Salcedo Show, here on AM 700 KSEV. Excuse me for being a little distracted. I have been contacted by one of the Salcedo Show guests today, and I want to make sure they know what's what. Did any of you happen to see, well, maybe you guys didn't see, you guys are probably at work. You probably saw some snippets when the Chris Salcedo Show was on in Dallas. This came down as breaking news. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona took to the Senate floor once again and gave a speech that we're going to cover today. Not because there was anything necessarily worthwhile listening to. Not because that it was based on any sort of thinking man's rationale. But because it's an example of what we are fighting as individuals who are, frankly, surprised by the level of conservatism that has been achieved under a president who has been a Republican for 5 minutes. The conservative movement has had more victories under Donald Trump than Jeff Flake's entire tenure in the United States Senate. Indeed, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, articulates more consistently and with more passion and with more fervor conservative principles than Jeff Flake ever has. With his pre-prepared, eloquent speech that his staff most likely helped him write. In fact, Jeff Flake showed much of his true colors yesterday as he excused poor behavior from the press to blame it all on Donald Trump's, what he called poor behavior. He blamed the current president for lying while excusing the basket of biased press for their out-and-out lies. By the way, the president did come out with his fake news awards, and he didn't go by network the way we did. The Salcedo Show did. And many of you actually put in some of your favorites. He went by incidents. He posted, 12 fake news incidents that he and his staff had evaluated were just beyond the pale by a basket of biased press that has lost all sense of itself and what they're there to do. Jeff Flake, the aptly named Jeff Flake, compared the president of the United States to Stalin. To Stalin. You know, that's just as vacuous as those who compare those with whom they disagree to Hitler. We can all agree that Donald Trump, for all of his faults and for all of his positives, not Joseph Stalin. Neither was Barack Obama. Barack Obama wasn't allowed to kill millions of people. Thank goodness. No thanks to Jeff Flake. See, because Jeff Flake didn't stand up. Jeff Flake is let me posit something to you, because I posited it to the good senator. And maybe I should read it verbatim. Let me paraphrase it first, and I'll read you what I wrote. If you think about it, who is responsible for Donald Trump's ascendancy and taking over the Republican Party? People like Jeff Flake. People like Mitch McConnell. People like John Boehner. Those individuals who sat by and abandoned you and me to Barack Obama's massive government overreach, to Barack Obama's betrayal of the Constitution and the rule of law. These individuals who are, for lack of a better term, it's so overused, I hate using it, rhinos, Republicans in name only, but that doesn't mean anything anymore, because being a Republican doesn't mean anything anymore. These people who call themselves Republicans, some are Ted Cruz. Others are the next incarnation of Castro. Big government, big statist buffoons wanting to set up a predicate where you can't get by without government. And they call themselves Republicans. Susan Collins. So, I wasn't comparing the killing part. I'm comparing the ideological part. So, at any rate, if you think about it, Jeff Flake, more than you or I, is responsible for Donald Trump. Think about this. If Jeff Flake and John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Shelley Moore Capito and Mitch McConnell and Bob Corker, if they had gone about keeping their promises to their conservative constituents, the ones who put them in office, doing what they campaigned on, instead of rolling over at every opportunity for the Democrats, then there would have been no room for an outside candidate like Donald Trump. Right? We went over this when Mitch McConnell started blaming talk radio for unrealistic expectations of Republicans. He thought it was unrealistic for us to hold them accountable for what they told us they were going to do. And he blamed talk radio because you guys got in your head, wait a minute, you campaigned on something, we voted for you, and you're supposed to deliver. That's the way this whole, election thing works. And they thought we in talk radio, did Mitch McConnell and others like him, that we were responsible for giving you unrealistic expectations when all we told you was, if you're going to campaign on something, you ought to work every day in office to fulfill it. But it seems every single time the Democrats got their way and the conservatives had to eat it. As a matter of fact, we're being told that today. The Republicans control every branch of government. Well, those who are voted into office, the executive and legislative branch. And we're told that we need to get Democrats on board. And many of us are just sick of the excuses. I understand how the Senate works and the rules and all of that kind of stuff, but it seems that these individuals who are inside, I saw Mitch McConnell yesterday. Well, as soon as the president tells us what he wants, then we'll get him we'll get him a bill that what he wants. So he took Lindsey Graham's side. Lindsey Graham goes in, as we told you, and cobbles together a bill that gave the Democrats everything they wanted and a promise to Republicans, we'll get to security later. We'll take care of illegal immigration later, which, of course, it never comes. And Lindsey Graham tried to shove that garbage down our throat again. Trump looked at it and said, no way. No way. So here comes Mitch McConnell. Oh, well, as soon as the president tells us what he really wants. He's told you what he wants. The wall, an end to chain migration, no excuses, end to the stupid lottery system. That's it. I'd throw in extra border agents, but Those are his main sticking points. Everything else, once you achieve those, can be done. But those are not contingent. Those must be, how do they put it up on Capitol Hill? Mandatory spending. You know I don't believe in mandatory spending. Because if a Congress puts spending in, they can take it out. But I want them to put around border security the same triggers that they put around Social Security. The same thing they put around all their welfare benefits up there on Capitol Hill. All the safeguards they're going to put around for the Dreamers and for illegal aliens. I want the same safeguards to make as mandatory as possible the wall. Mandatory as possible the end of chain migration. Mandatory as possible to end the lottery system. It must be done. But one gets the sense that that bill that Lindsey Grahamnesty put up there didn't do that. So here comes Mitch McConnell. Oh, well, so the president gives us political cover. We'll give him something he wants. Right, sure. Sure you will. You knew what his tenets were. You knew what his pillars were, and you brought him a piece of garbage. So if you're trying to drive a wedge between the people and Donald Trump, Majority Leader McConnell, I don't think that's working. Now, let me tell you what I said about Jeff Flake. Let me pull it up here on the Chris Salcedo Show Facebook page. By the way, you want to, if you think it's at all pertinent to your particular circle, go ahead and share this. And I'm gonna tell you this before we even get into the sound bites. But Jeff Flake's speech, because it was happening live on the show yesterday, we took it on the North Texas version of the Salcedo Show. Oh, by the way, also posted on the Salcedo Show page, you'll see the top 5 fake news stories since Donald Trump's been in office. We said to Senator Flake, Senator, you are a vile, dishonest, and contemptible human being. All of the accusations you laid exclusively at Donald Trump's feet were actually perpetrated by a biased press and the former occupier of the Oval Office, a man you refused to hold accountable. It was your timidity, lack of a core, lack of character that resulted in the American people and the people of Arizona losing faith in you. If you and your kind had come anywhere close to living up to the conservative planks of the GOP platform, Trump would never have been able to take over your party. You and your inaction are responsible for Donald Trump. I take great comfort that you leave public life knowing just how badly you failed our beloved country when you abandoned us to the likes of Barack Obama. That is on the Chris Salcedo Show Facebook page for you to share and share alike. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. It's the voice of Texas. Be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Chris Salcedo Show. I'm pretty gratified that some of the fake news incidents articulated by the President of the United States as being major fake news events, and they were, made our list as well. For those of you who are not familiar with this, Donald Trump has had 90% negative news coverage since he entered the Oval Office. Now, many in the basket of biased press, or since he was running for election, too, many in the basket of biased press would say he's earned it because they despise him, and America despises him, which is not true. As a matter of fact, I have a story I'm going to play for you guys from CNN. CNN visited 6 Democrats in Ohio who had voted for Donald Trump, asked them, so how do you feel about Donald Trump a year later? Wait until you hear the response. And, this talk of a wave in this year's elections, I don't know. After hearing what I heard from Ohio, a key swing state, ladies and gentlemen, I don't see it. In particular, because the economy is going crazy, because we have had the jackbooted thug Obama's foot on our throat, our economic throats, for the last 8 years, and now we just want to get out and be Americans again. Start producing again. Start creating again. Start innovating again. So Donald Trump compiles his, what I'm hoping will be an annual event, because as long as he's in the Oval Office, the fake news will continue. Because the press, they are not dedicated journalists. They are dedicated Democrats. This is a truism you all have to know. The press, they are not made up of dedicated journalists. They are dedicated Democrats. And they will continue to lie, to invent, to not vet stories. Simple, plain and simple. By the way, one more thing before we leave Jeff Flake, because we'll circle back to him probably in the second hour. We, too, suffer from Jeff Flakes here in the state of Texas. People who campaign as so-called Republicans. Oh, I'm conservative. Oh, yeah, you betcha. And then they govern as liberal extremists. Or they roll over for liberal extremists. The Joe Strauss caucus inside of the United States, or inside of Austin, inside the state capitol. They are prime examples of Jeff Flakes on a local level. Condemning a Republican who stands up for conservatism while holding blameless those who were actually lying. Dan Huberty, Sarah Davis, Byron Cook, Charlie Guerin, Joe Strauss. Those types of individuals who, let's just be honest. If we were a majority Democrat state, they'd be Democrats. The only reason they run as Republicans is because Democrats can't get a second look in this state in most areas. Thank goodness. No, very few people can articulate to me, how is Dan Huberty a conservative? Give me an example of how he fought for legislation that was conservative. Did he bring accountability to schools? No. All he did was want to write him a big old check to continue business as usual. Educrat. One big educrat. Did he want to improve test scores? No. Just make sure the money's flowing, baby, to all of his special interests. The kids? The kids. Oh, come on. What about the parents? Parents? They don't get any choice. We tell them what to do. Does that sound like a conservative to you? Sarah Davis afflicted with the same, let them eat cake attitude. Talk to you conservatives? Pshaw. Perish the thought. Joe Strauss, the only time he sits down to talk with somebody, if it's with what is the name of that liberal rag? Is it Texas Tribune, right? He plants stories in there. There was a hit piece on us, on the Amigos, on this station, that had Joe Strauss's fingerprints all over it. We took great pride in it. We were elated that Joe Strauss took the time to think we were worth his time and attention. If only he had the manhood to show up on the Chris Salcedo Show and answer some questions. If only. He could have explained why didn't we get refinancing of our education system done? Why didn't we get property taxing done? Now, of course, he tried to blame Governor Abbott and the lieutenant governor and conservatives for, just being completely unreasonable about bringing accountability to government-run institutions. I know these leftists like the back of my hand, but at least we would be able to challenge him. But see, when you are a leftist, you don't like to be challenged. I mean, well, but to be honest, none of us really like to be challenged. Can we be honest about that? That's human nature. Nobody likes to be told, hey, I think you're wrong. Those who believe in actually finding solutions say, okay, I think you're wrong. You think I'm wrong. What can we agree on? You know, how can we chart a way forward? I hear what you're saying. Let me see if I can, and if you're an elected leader, let me see if I can address some of your concerns. Maybe I didn't think of that particular aspect. But you see, when you're a statist, it's my way or the highway. And that is how these individuals conduct themselves. Progressives, statists, liberals. This is how they govern. Whether it's on the microcosm and, you know, with the individuals who shouldn't be calling themselves Republicans, Huberty Davis, Cook, Guerin, and there are don't get me wrong, there are several others, and Strauss. They on the microcosm don't want to hear. It's not about the people. It's about what's their agenda is. So you can see the same mentality, not the same tactics because they're not allowed, thankfully, in the United States, but the same mentality in the dictator in Cuba. It's all his way. I mean, the same thing with the proletariat in China. Xi Jinping and his cabal of little tiny elitist leftists who run that entire country into the ground, and what the people want, nobody cares in the government. Now, Sarah Davis has had an open invitation under this program since it started, but we're beneath her notice. We're beneath her ability, or not ability. She has the ability to talk to us. She just doesn't. She's just not wired that way. To engage, to have a conversation with, to actually hear the concerns. She'd rather control the message so she can sit there and send out flyers that she's conservative. If people in her district who don't listen to this program or others who are honest about what she's doing, they'll go, oh, yeah, conservative, sure. And then click, vote. And that's the game. Our job is to inform you. Same thing with Huberty. I mean, what astonished me about Huberty is that this guy got videotaped, and we actually talked to the journalist. He got videotaped drunk as a skunk in the state capitol, and he was still elected. Still elected. Because Joe Strauss needed him there, got some money, got out there, dissuaded challengers. Today we're going to talk to somebody who's challenging Dan Huberty. Challenging Dan Huberty for District 121. He served in the United States Marine Corps. Solid, staunch conservative. He's an African American. And Dan Huberty is so afraid of this man. Dan Huberty has gone to court to block him from being on the ballot. I kid you not. The same chicken blank individual the same Dan Huberty who called up 3 county commissioners to divert county resources to pick up trash in his neighborhood while Houstonians were dying from Hurricane Harvey, has filed a lawsuit to prevent somebody from challenging because he believes that seat is his. I wish you folks in the 121 would send a message to Dan Huberty and to Joe Strauss and to Sarah Davis and to all the others who think it's their government by not returning him to the State House. We will talk to his challenger and find out why Dan Huberty is trying to use the courts to prevent a challenger in his race. That doesn't sound like a conservative to me. Back in a minute, the Chris Salcedo Show on the Voice of Texas. So the awards were given out last night by the President of the United States, the Fake News Awards. Now, I'm going to present the fake news awards, and we'll have some discussions about this, and I want to get your guys' take on this. If I have time, I'll get into Jeff Flake's speech. At the bottom of the hour, we will hear, and you folks on the Vida Television Network, this is going to be local Texas stuff. You guys don't know who Dan Huberty is. All you guys have to know is that Dan Huberty is like it's just like Jeff Flake. Pretends to be a Republican. Pretends to be a conservative. Dan Huberty, and actually is a little different than Jeff Flake, because Dan Huberty's a drunk who shows up to work drunk as a skunk. It makes him very malleable, and this is why Joe Strauss loves the man, is because Joe Strauss just tells him what to do. Okay, I'll go do that. That's kind of the caliber of Dan Huberty. Not a conservative. Big government, educrat, utilizes his position in government for favors to make money. So you guys know the type. You guys just don't know the name, and you don't know his history. And you guys, for that matter, you folks on the Vida Television Network don't even know who Joe Strauss is. Joe Strauss is the Barack Obama of Texas. And he has lieutenants inside of the State House who basically turn the State House, which is majority alleged Republican, and make sure that Democrat priorities are top of mind and addressed first. It is the mentality of Joe Strauss that made sure that the Republican-controlled House in Texas, the number 1 and number 2 legislation passers, were Democrats. That is their priority. The priority of Sarah Davis is the Democrat Party. The priority of Dan Huberty is the Democrat Party. The priority of Charlie Guerin is the Democrat Party. The priority of Byron Cook, just like on the national stage, folks, the priority of John Boehner was the Democrat Party. The priority of Mitch McConnell is the Democrat Party, of John McCain, of Bob Corker. So just to give you guys a perspective on who these people are. Now, you guys won't hear the interview because it doesn't affect you guys on the Vida Television Network, either the nationwide Roku and Fire Stick distribution, or you folks in South Carolina. So, but understand, I'm confident you guys have people just like this inside of your legislature. And what I'm hoping you guys will glean from the program is to understand that these people are not foregone conclusions. We don't have to put up with the Bob Corkers of the world. And by the way, speaking of Bob Corker, Jeff Flake should have gone and talked to Bob Corker before he gave his disgraceful speech, which we will highlight here on the program as well. Because Bob Corker came out, what was it, a week ago, Russell? And said, yeah, man, now I know what Donald Trump means by fake news. Corker was raked over the coals on the tax deal. Over a lie, over a media-generated lie. And Corker's like, they won't listen. They just keep saying the same thing. We give them facts after facts after facts. The bill didn't originate in the Senate. The carve-out was done months ago. The fact that I happened to benefit from it, I wasn't even part of the process. And they didn't want to hear it. They wanted a scapegoat because dedicated Democrats in the ranks of the press didn't want you to have control of more of your own money, and certainly didn't want to have success stories for Donald Trump and the economy. Speaking of which, did you guys hear town hall news? What Apple is doing? Apple, the latest in a string of companies, upping wages, upping bonuses, repatriating money back to the United States. The stock market went nuts yesterday on this news. Money is coming back to the United States. Capital investment is coming back to the United States, and you can't thank Mitch McConnell for it. You can't thank Bob Corker for it. Well, maybe you can thank Bob Corker for it. You can't thank Jeff Flake for it. So, because all of these people could have been standing up for these principles the last 8 years, they rolled over and let Obama ravage us. So, on the Texas level, there are lawmakers who, and it's different than just rolling over, because the lawmakers in Texas who call themselves Republicans or are actually liberal progressives, folks, the people I've been mentioning, Huberty, Davis, Cook, Guerin, and Strauss, they don't even pretend to like conservatives. As a matter of fact, they show their disdain for conservatives nearly every single time they go up to the State House and do official business. Sometimes in their public appearances, they mock and ridicule us. So this is who we're dealing with. It's a step above. It's arrogant left-wing extremism by those who dare to call themselves Republicans. So anyway, that's just some reference for you folks who are watching the Vida Television Network across Roku and Fire Stick and those in South Carolina. You guys have them too. I understand that. And you guys just needed to know the reference because I'm going to be making some reference. And we can tie it all to this mentality on the national stage from so-called leaders down here to the state of Texas. And look, what is your impression around the country of us? That we're a conservative bastion, and by and large we are. Our people are. But that doesn't stop a lot of these boll weevils from getting in there, running as Republicans, who they're actually Democrats, Davis and the rest, and undermining conservative principles and undermining conservatism and setting up a government that is responsive to government, not responsive to the people. I can think of no other greater example of this than their stalwart advocacy for the failed government-run education system. Because there's just too much money there. Just too much money for special interests who pad campaign coffers. Meanwhile, children don't learn. Meanwhile, our great teachers have to dig out of their already meager salaries to buy school supplies because everybody else in the educrat ranks skimmed off the top. There's not enough money left over. Huh. Many of we conservatives, and this is something that Huberty, Krause, Cook, Davis, they don't want to hear. We have advocated changing the system around to the very least where the teachers and the students get the first crack at the money. And then what's left over, the bureaucrats can handle. Oh, no, we can't do that. The bureaucrats, they fund our government. They fund our campaigns. Oh, no. Yeah, you want to strike fear into an educrat? Tell them you want to reform the system to where teachers get the money first. And the classroom gets the money first. And then they can have what's left over. Oh, watch them run for the exits. I mean, that might be enough to make Sarah Davis and Dan Huberty turn Democrat. 281-558-5738. 281-558-KSEV. Trump giving out the awards last night for fake news. And this was a subject matter that Jeff Flake was railing about. But who was it? It was on Tucker Carlson's show. It came down, and it was Ed Henry, who was on the White House lawn with the big announcement. I mean, you guys should have seen it. There was the red carpet and the flash, but no, there was none of that. It was just an announcement. By the way, I can't say this. Trump crashed the RNC server last night. I couldn't get to this story for about a good hour and a half, 2 hours after the announcement. Here's Ed Henry with his very detailed list, and we'll start and stop because we remember a lot of these fake news stories. The fake news stories that Jeff Flake either forgot or Jeff Flake applauded. It's okay to lie about somebody you hate, right, Jeff Flake?
The top five, starting with number 5, the president calling out the Washington Post for, in his words, falsely reporting a massive sold-out rally in Pensacola, Florida, as being empty. He says a dishonest reporter showed a picture hours before the event started, and it was much, much bigger.
I remember that. And again, this is what happens when you have a press who starts off, whose starting point is, I hate Donald Trump. This is what allows all of their, and folks, I was in news. You source, you double source, you confirm and reconfirm before you go to press, before you go to print, before you go to air. That's just standard operating procedure. This dude had to have known. A Washington Post so-called reporter, he knew that he was there 2 hours before the event started, took the picture and said, oh, it's empty. Now, why do you do that? You're not a journalist. You then turn into a propagandist. And that's exactly what this Washington Post so-called reporter, he's not a reporter. He's not a journalist. When you do garbage like this, you lose that title.
Number 4, Time magazine falsely reporting that the president removed a bust of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from the Oval Office. Remember, this was something that Time reported literally day 1, day 2 of this administration. It was a fake story.
Yeah, it was a fake story. They took a picture where the bust was out of frame and said, "See, proof, he took the bust out." I'm thinking to myself, that's your, gee, what a sleuth. I mean, couldn't you get your eye off the camera to look around before you went to print with that? But the goal wasn't to be accurate, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the biggest point I want to bring forward. The goal by the current basket of bias press isn't to be accurate. The goal is to harm and undermine Trump. And they're willing to sacrifice their own credibility to do it. That makes them incredibly dangerous people. Don't tell Jeff Flake. We'll have the other top fake news stories, courtesy of Ed Henry and Fox News, coming up on the other side of the break. And your calls to 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Stick around. The man who is standing up to Dan Huberty's thuggery, a U.S. Marine that Dan Huberty is going to court to prevent from being on the ballot. Hey, that's what all good liberals do, right? They use the courts what they can't get done at the ballot box. Back in a minute, the Chris Salcedo Show on The Voice. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Chris Salcedo Show. The list continues from Donald Trump's fake news awards, Ed Henry giving the top 5. By the way, we've linked to the entire list of 12 or 13. It's on the Chris Salcedo Show Facebook page if you want to go through all of the fake news stories and take a walk down amnesia lane and see how the press has sacrificed its own credibility all in an effort to undermine the Trump administration. You know, if you put yourself in the leftists' shoes, in the basket of bias press, remember, dedicated Democrats, not dedicated journalists, dedicated Democrats, first and foremost. You put yourself in their shoes and you see the occupation of the Oval Office by Barack Obama. And they had it all. Left-wing extremism, open contempt of conservatives, people of faith, open contempt for the rule of law, the Constitution, limits on government's power, friendliness with despotic regimes like the Cuban regime, the Iranians, allowing the Chinese to militarize the South China Sea without any consequence, allowing Kim Jong-un to develop his nuclear missile technology without any consequence. I mean, the press, they were elated. America's going to be another third world country. Woohoo! Then nobody will hate us anymore. Woohoo! Happy days are here again. Da, 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 da. And then here comes Donald Trump. And he starts uttering things that the press just recoils from. America first. and they're aghast. What do you mean America first? The rule of law. They start breaking out into hives, and we got to stop this. And they had the same reaction at the FBI leadership. Peter Strzok stroking his tart that he was stepping out on his wife with, and Andrew McCabe. They all had the same reaction. Rule of law. That's not America anymore. Barack Obama fixed that. Donald Trump starts talking about 3%, 4%, 5% GDP growth. What are you, out of your mind? Barack Obama told us the best American can do now is 1.5% GDP. By the way, Donald Trump will eclipse that. I think later this week, maybe today, I think we're supposed to get those numbers. I was talking to Lance about his thoughts on this, about whether or not we're going to achieve 3% GDP growth. He said no. And I'll agree with him that we would have to have a gangbusters fourth quarter for that to happen. But it would be poetic justice if it did. That Donald Trump, a man who had never held political office before, was able to set up an environment where the American economy achieved 3% GDP, something Barack Obama didn't have the brains or the ideological bent to do his entire occupation of the Oval Office. That would be sheer poetry, in my view. We'll see if it happens. Back to fake news. And number 3, I believe we're on with Ed Henry of Fox News.
Number 3, CNN, in the words of the president, falsely reporting that candidate Donald Trump and his son Donald Trump Jr. had access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks before the public did. That was not true, had to be retracted as well.
Yeah, wait a minute. We're not going to let that go. We talked about this yesterday, but those of you who weren't tuned in, we all remember this. CNN, Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., they saw the WikiLeaks leak before it was released. They had access, special access. That means they were working with the Russians because we know WikiLeaks works with the Russians. So that means Trump worked with the Russians. By the way, the same rationale is with Fusion GPS. You know, Fusion GPS worked with the Russians too. And the DNC and Hillary Clinton paid Fusion GPS for the fake Trump dossier. That's illegal, by the way. That's you can't pay a foreign government for that kind of information. That's illegal. So if we accepted CNN's biased premise that by Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. getting access to WikiLeaks before they released the damaging emails that they had hacked, that was proof of Russia collusion, then so too is the Fusion GPS Trump dossier revelation that it was paid for by Hillary and paid for by the DNC. That too means there was Russia collusion on part of the Democrats. However, the reason why this story falls down is that the WikiLeaks release happened a full day before Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. had access to that link that was sent to them. It was already public. Then it was sent to the Trumps. CNN got it wrong. Because remember, they start from the place, I hate Trump. That's where they start. And it's affecting their credibility and their judgment, as evidenced by number 3 on the president's top fake news list.
2, the president going after ABC News' Brian Ross. In the president's words, in this thing just tweeted out, Brian Ross, quote, chokes and sends markets in a downward spiral with false report. Remember, that was about retired General Michael Flynn and pleading guilty to that charge of lying to the FBI. Brian Ross suggesting that this dated back to actual collusion in the campaign. That had to be walked back. That was not true. The stock market crashed on that initial fake news.
Now, Brian Ross ought to be thanking President Trump today, because I thought that was a very charitable explanation, saying that Brian Ross didn't come up with that report because of his left-wing extremist bias. He didn't come up with that report because his overarching goal in life is to damage Donald Trump. He just choked. You know, it's kind of like that batter. 3 balls, 2 strikes, stepping up. The entire game rests on him. He's got bases loaded. All he's got to do is get a single. And he whiffs. That's how Donald Trump couched Brian Ross. It's such a huge responsibility being a responsible journalist that he just choked. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I recognize you're trying to be charitable to ABC News, but ABC News acted irresponsibly. Brian Ross has a track record of being a left-wing biased freak who lets his so-called journalistic training be overridden by his political bias. And that's what a true journalist is not supposed to do. All right? Russell, do we have a drum roll anywhere in there? I mean, I know I'm kind of hitting that. I mean, I don't have a drum roll on my computer. I've got to get one. I've got to have it right here on the computer where I can just, because who knows, there could be a fake news award every month. I hope he does it every month. But here's number one, ladies and gentlemen. The number one fake news story of the year, courtesy of Ed Henry at Fox News.
President calling that out. Finally, number one in the president's estimation for the 2017 Fake News Awards. I know you've been waiting for this, Tucker. The New York Times' Paul Krugman, the columnist, claiming on the day of the president's historic landslide victory, in the president's words, the economy would never recover. As you can see from the market activity today, announcements like Apple saying they're pouring a lot more money into this economy, bringing repatriated money back into the United States. That is something that the White House is crowing about tonight.
Yeah, number one. All right, that's enough of that. All right, so there you go. And Paul Krugman, he went with Paul. So he didn't go with a CNN story. I was shocked. How many of you remembered Paul Krugman, the biased left-wing economist? And this is true. This is true. Krugman said that the stock market would be in shambles. It would never recover. Folks, the stock market is growing at a rate that we have never seen. The stock market added 1,000 points in a week. It's never done that. Certainly during the Messiah's reign, Barack Obama. So, Paul Krugman, the New York Times, is the winner of Fake News of 2017. Thank you to the President of the United States for finally calling out these people for their dishonest reporting and their disservice to the United States of America. Now, Jeff Flake didn't like this at all. We'll get to his sound bites, but coming up next, the man who wants to replace Dan Huberty, let me rephrase that. The man who needs to replace Dan Huberty in the Texas State House. Up next, the Chris Salcedo Show on the Voice of Texas.
Please do. I would love to know this person, because I was going to have a similar conversation.
And I'm only going to add, I had a brief conversation. I quickly gave the phone to his people.
So let me say this. Picking up trash and saving lives. Any elected official that wants to campaign on trash is more important than people can do so. But in Precinct 4, and by golly, by this body here, people come first.
That's the County Commissioner's Court responding to Dan Huberty in District 127. Trash pickup is more important than people. You guys noticing the theme with these people who dare call themselves Republicans? They don't talk to the conservatives. They refuse to come on to conservative talk radio. They don't believe themselves accountable to the conservative movement. And then when the chips are down, when people are literally dying in the streets, these types of people think of themselves first. Now, look, I am calling on everyone in that county commissioner's court meeting who recognize that Dan Huberty is a piece of excrement for doing what he did. People were dying in the streets, and this guy calls up and he wants his trash picked up. Not one, not two, 3 county commissioners. He wanted county resources diverted to his house from the worst natural disaster, not only to hit this state, not only to hit this region, but to hit the nation. And Dan Huberty's worried about his garbage. Dan Huberty is garbage, ladies and gentlemen. District 127 deserves a heck of a lot better. So all of you folks in the county commissioner's court who were rightly mocking, who were rightly chastising Dan Huberty for doing what he did, the drunkard, Representative Popsicle, he needs to go. District 127 deserves somebody, dare I say, somebody who's worn the uniform, who actually has an idea of service to the people in their mind, not service to those who can pad his campaign coffers, grease the skids, pay off the educrats. Reginald C. Grant, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go there yet. Let me just say this, that Dan Huberty going to these lengths to prevent a challenger in District 127, I don't know the optics look that good of a drunk, self-interested, loopy, freak job who calls himself a Republican going to the courts to prevent a Marine Corps veteran, a black man, from even challenging him on the ballot. That doesn't look good at all, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if this wasn't enough.
2. The head of my road and bridge, his name is Bill Lee. He's one of these guys that's just grown up in the precinct, serving folks for years. I call him Rooster. He's the head of the barnyard. He has 4 Ps. So if you're an elected official and someone calls you up whining about their trash, tell them Rooster's 4 Ps. First P is patience. But you can always take care of it personally. So those are the 4 Ps.
You left out the 5th P.
I didn't have a 5th P.
There is a 5th P.
What's your 5th P?
Puberty.
Act like grown-ups?
No, this is puberty. What's puberty problem with?
Oh,
Yes. Oh, yeah. Puberty rhymes with Huberty. That's the elected representative that those commissioners were making reference to. I have that county commissioner's court audio, and I'm going to continue to use it. Dan Huberty is a disgrace to the people of Texas. Dan Huberty is not just because he's a Joe Strauss lieutenant, a fake Republican, a fake conservative, but the character of the man. The character of a man who would sue a conservative black man, a former Marine, to keep him off the ballot so he doesn't have to face him. The kind of man that would say, my trash, Lovey, my trash is piling up in my neighborhood. I've got to get on the phone and call the county commissioners to take care of my trash. Excuse me, Mr. Huberty, people are dying in the streets of Houston. Can you wait? Get somebody over here now. Some elitist prig, P-R-I-G, folks, Dan Huberty, belongs nowhere near decision-making processes in this state. He is a sham. He's a fake, and he deserves to be retired to his cushy lobbyist job. Go find another cushy lobbyist job. You've exploited the people of Texas long enough, Dan Huberty, and it goes the same for those of you who have your ideological persuasion. The others out there who are running for re-election, who pretend to be Republicans and have your same sort of moral character. Back in a minute. The Chris Salcedo Show on the Voice of Texas. And that's going to do it for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide for this evening on the Vida Television Network. Weigh in anytime on the program on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX. And you can leave voicemail or email at chrissalcedo.com. We'll see you next time for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida Television Network.